Thompson, and you're listening to Foley is Pod. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the hardcore legend himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mick Foley. Mick, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Miss you guys in studio, but although I have done a few podcasts from my mom's house, this is the first episode I'm doing from my old bedroom.
Wow.
And this is no optical illusion. If it looks like the world's smallest bedroom, it is 8 feet by 8 feet. I grew up in a 64 square foot bedroom. And I think when I was 10, we had 2 extra feet put on. So it became a 10 by 8. But it's a tight fit now. But and my brother, before this was my dad's office, which became my room when I was probably 5 or 6. Before that, it was me and my brother in another 64 square foot room, doubled up in bunk beds. But hey, if you don't know any different, you think you have it made, and we definitely did. But it's cool to be coming at you from the place where the original Dude Love script was written. So many of my creative endeavors and a couple of naughty things I did that we probably shouldn't be talking about on a family show.
Man, I'm pumped to be here. Of course, we are going to be talking about the Hall of Fame, but there's so much more to talk about. Before we talk about your Hall of Fame experience, let's talk about your most recent Hall of Fame experience. We got to see you this past Friday, induct a longtime friend of yours. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that was so much fun. I know we kind of teased that somebody had asked me, and I said, we'll reveal it as soon as WWE reveals it, but they never revealed it. And I was completely fine with being a surprise. I wasn't lying when I talked about how happy I was and how I'd had a perpetual smile on my face, because I always thought the world of Stacy and had lost touch with her, for quite a few years. Hadn't actually seen her since the day after Christmas 2005. So when that text came through, these are great photos. I hadn't seen these before. Just speaking of Tori Wilson, Tori was one of those people that I always liked, always said hello, but a lot of the conversations with your colleagues can be in the 20 to 30 second range, because you're seeing so many people. I'm talking about even when you're working with them, right? Hey, how's everything going? Good? Yeah. And if you ask somebody, is that person a friend of yours? You'd say, oh yeah, sure, but you don't know anything about them. But then Tori and I represented WWE in Shanghai, China, I think for 9 or 10 days at the World Special Olympic Games. And we really hit it off. And, you go from being a colleague to being a good friend. And so I was thrilled to have Tori there, and I was thrilled to be there. I don't know if it made sense to fans at home, but it's just a really nice friendship. And I think a deep mutual respect, and hopefully look at the 3-way hug there. Oh my goodness, that was really cool. And I had an amazing night. I really enjoyed it. I had look at her. She doesn't even look like she's aged a day.
No,
right?
no.
She just looked magnificent. She had her mom and dad, her husband, her 3 children. And I really liked and appreciated the fact that she stressed her superfan roots. And it's one thing to say you're a super fan; it's another thing to be seen when you're like 14, holding up a sign in the crowd. So she's just a spectacular person, and I'm so happy that she's leading a great life, and she's she had a great. Family support system. I remember her introducing me to her mom and dad Specifically, she wanted me to meet her mom and dad, maybe in 2004. But man, I just thought the world of her, and so I was happy to do that. I wanted to make sure I didn't go long. I want to make sure I didn't make it too much about myself, while still injecting a little bit of experience. Like when I said that I knew from experience that this is one of the biggest nights of my life, and I looked over at Tori and I said I think she would agree with me, and now I get to be a small part of one of the best nights.
A fantastic night, a fantastic Hall of Fame. Of course, they honored a lot of other greats that same night, including Rey Mysterio and Andy Kaufman and Mr. White, and of course Mr. Muda. I'm curious though, this was your first time being at an event like this in a little bit, since there's been so much change in recent
Yeah.
over the last year. Did you run into any old friends, see any unexpected faces, anything like that?
Well, there's a lot of new talent there since I was last on WWE TV. I believe it's been over 2 years, right?
Yeah.
The Undertaker's, and that was Raw. So this was a SmackDown crew. But there were a lot of people I did know. I mean, look at a friend of mine pointed out this is like the happiest he's ever seen Kevin Owens look. I I've been writing the Santa letters and the doing the videos for Kevin and his kids for probably 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
So it's cool. He's someone I don't see too often, but consider him a good friend. And you know what? It's funny to say I talk about a special bond. Like you don't have to ride with someone, room with someone, to have that bond. And it's such a strange thing that the Santa letters have done that for me with a handful of talent. Like Lacey Evans is someone I can count on one hand the number of conversations I've had with her. But I think this is the fourth or fifth year where I've been doing the letter thing, and so we really hit it off. I reminisced with I'm calling her Tough Daria now. What's Darius? But usually I know the professional name and not the badass female who was the GM for a while.
Oh, Sonya Deville.
Yes, yeah. So when I saw her as when she was Daria, her real name Daria, and she remembered that on the night that she was eliminated, that I sent a text message. I sent a message because I saw she was following me on Twitter, saying, "Hey, you got something special. Please don't give up. Please pursue
Wow.
this." And she said, well, "We're like, can you give me some advice?" And I said, first thing I would do would go to everyone who played a role in that show and thank them for the opportunity, either verbally or in writing, and just say that you hope that they will keep you in mind, her in mind, for something that comes up. And that's exactly what happened. As a matter of fact, if you look at the final episode of Holy Foley, the two people that Noelle was training with were Sonia and Bianca Belair.
Hmm.
So here's poor Noelle. She's got bruised ribs. I mean, they even said, you don't have to do this. Like, she was in such incredible pain, and then she's got to pick up Bianca uh, on her shoulders and carry her out the ring. I peeked in just for about 15 seconds on her tryout, and my heart was breaking because I could tell she had hit the wall, but she just kept going. But those were just a few. And then I had a fun, there's a great photo of me and the Nature Boy, like a really great photo. Yeah, look at that.
That is a great picture. My goodness.
It's so there were like four photos that we snapped. They're all, I think they were all selfies I took. I'm the worst bow tie in history. No way am I ever wearing a bow tie when I have a chance to wear a regular tie. I had a nice
That
meeting.
wasn't your funeral tuxedo, was it?
No, this wasn't the funeral tie. I lost. Yeah, yeah. It was. I did tell you the Steph, when we did our Stephanie McMahon episode, I did tell you the Stephanie McMahon tuxedo story, right?
Yes, you did.
Does it bear repeating since we're talking Hall of Fame tuxedos?
I
I
mean,
can
why not? Why not?
bottom line it anyway. It's worth retelling anyway. When Stephanie, before she was a talent, she was in marketing. And even when she became an on-air talent for about 6 months, she was in the marketing department. So she was just a talent, and she hung out, and she didn't have all the backstage duties, but she did an extraordinary job in the marketing department. So they agreed to bring me, and I drove there. They didn't fly us up because I lived in Florida at the time, to the Boardwalk Hotel, Disney's Boardwalk Hotel. They put us up in a beautiful 2-bedroom suite, and all I had to do was go down for about an hour. There was an outside like cocktail mixer and do a little schmoozing. And Stephanie sees me arrive in my tuxedo. She's so so overdressed, and she says, "Mick, you got to be sweltering." I am, but I'm okay. I'm okay. Finally, for about 30 minutes, Mick, please, I'm begging you, please take that jacket off. I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Yes." And I take the jacket off, and underneath it, it's a Mankind shirt with the
Oh,
sleeves chopped
oh,
off at like 2/3 or 1/3 length, and the bottom's all jagged. And I'm like, she's like, her eyes went wide. I was like, there's no middle ground here. You either get a flannel and sweats or you're getting the tuxedo. That's the way I roll.
I love it. I love it so much. Listen, this is not the first time you've been to the Hall of Fame. I guess your first time stepping up to the podium, if you will, was 2004. We've covered WrestleMania 20 and how you returned in the archives, but we should also mention you were up there that night to induct Don Morocco into the Hall of Fame.
Was that 2004 or was that earlier?
I don't know. I thought it was 04.
I thought it was like 99 or 2000. I don't know. We'll have Grillo behind the scenes. Is that air vent bothering you? I could sit up a little bit.
Hey, so yeah, you went in 2004. Yeah, that's right. So
Okay, yeah.
what was your experience like? Were you shocked that I mean, listen, this isn't the first time this past weekend you've been asked to induct someone. What about the first time though,
Well,
Don?
this was a situation where they I don't know if they gave Don a choice,
Oh,
which I felt a little bad about. I mean, I guess I would be considered firepower, on that on that show. And look, like I was so lucky when I got inducted in 2013 that they already had, they had Arnold Schwarzenegger inducting Bruno and Maria Menounos, inducting Bob Backlund and Mr. McMahon, Stephanie inducted Trish Stratus, Mr. McMahon inducted Donald Trump. Like there was already a lot of firepower, and so they just said, "Mick, you can ask whoever you want." So I asked Terry Funk. I don't think Morocco had that same choice.
I
I think
got
I
you.
foisted upon him because of my, my great respect and fascination with the Morocco Snuka feud. So I don't know if I was the best guy to be inducting Don Morocco. I considered it a heck of an honor, and I tried to do a good job. But back then, it was not as nearly as big. The Hall of Fame was not nearly as big as it became.
Right.
Especially, I think it peaked, right before the pandemic, before they had to, out of necessity, tie it into, the SmackDown show. It was just once they did
Two
uh,
nights of
the two
WrestleMania.
nights, then you had to trim some fat somewhere, and so the Hall of Fame became a little bit less. It's still great. It's still important. I love the stage, the elaborate stage. I'm so grateful that when I was inducted, it was at MSG, and they had such a beautiful set. The in ring thing is great. I mean, you saw the photos just like I
Yes.
did. It looks really good. But going back to what I was saying about it not being quite as big as it would later become, when Randy Orton jumped me, I was honored in the ring. They called it a hardcore ceremony in MSG in 2003. They were going to induct me into the WWE Hall of Fame that night, 2003. And I remember Steph giving me a call. She didn't want my feelings to be hurt. She said, Mick, we're just concerned, with the hall was still relatively new, and most of the people in it were 50s, 60s, 70s. And here I was at, 30, I guess I was 38 at the time, in 2000, I think so, 38 or 39. And I said, no, I'm fine with that. And they just lined up some hardcore wrestlers, and it turned out to be a good little ceremony. And most importantly, it led to Randy Orton attacking me, splitting my head open like a ripe melon, and throwing me down a flight of stairs. So that's the way we do things on our way out. You try to make the world, if you can't make it a little better place for all mankind, make it better for Randy Orton at least. I caught the red eye from LA, so I'm going without sleep. I don't know if you could tell. I'm trying to bring my A game, but it's difficult, Uncle Conrad. I'm going to be honest with you. And I was just thinking about it while I was driving. I was like, oh, I remember, because there was a little bit of a controversy in 2013 that almost derailed, or at least greatly affected my attitude and what I was going to say. And what brought me back from that brink was remembering when I was in NXT, not NXT, Impact, and I get a 203 text message, and it's WWE asking if they'd mind if I would mind if they promote my book, which was an Impact Wrestling book, on their show. You want to promote my book on the show? This, yeah, Mr. McMahon thinks it's the right thing to do. So at that time, for 1 year, we had this beautiful condo in Florida, and they actually had like a movie room. So we reserved it for that night, and I sat there with my family. And the moment I heard Michael Cole say, "Hey, our good friend Mick Foley has a new book out," and they really put it over, I made like a little promise to myself. I don't think I said it out loud, but a promise is still a promise. The promise was, if I'm ever asked to be in the WWE Hall of Fame, I'm going to say absolutely yes, with no conditions placed on it. I'm not going to say I need to go last. I'm not going to say I need X amount of time. And then I found myself feeling left out. USA, I guess, had made the decision, or at least I'd heard they made the decision. They were going to edit the show, and in order to show Donald Trump's speech, they were going to ixnay the Foley speech. And I let it get to me. It really hurt my feelings, to the point where I remember calling up my wife and saying, I don't want anyone from my family coming to the Hall of Fame. I don't want it to be important enough to bother me. And then I would like visualize my speech just being, hey, thank you, and like throwing my ring out to the crowd and walking away with the worst Hall of Fame speech ever. And then I remembered that promise I made to myself. And I'd gone on Twitter, I think, and kvetched, I guess would probably be a good term, kind term for it. But I remembered that promise, and that changed things for me. And I went into Mr. McMahon's office, and Hunter was in there, and Stephanie was in there, and Kevin Dunn, and I just said, look, I'm sorry. It's a great honor to be in here. I'm going to enjoy every moment of it. And what Kevin says, Mick, why didn't you just come to us? And that's what I should have done, instead of complaining and taking my case to social media. So do you want me, I mean, I know I'm rambling on because I haven't.
No, keep going. This is what we're listening for. Yeah, please.
I had to make a couple of different. There were a couple caveats. One was that I put my family up at a nice hotel within a few blocks of MSG, because the rest of the crew was in Hackensack, and I also knew that they liked the talent and family and friends who were going to be there in the crowd to be there like 4 hours early. And so I told talent relations, listen, I've got a son on the autism spectrum. If he has to wait 4 hours, when I get out there, no one from my family will be there. So they let them come in at their own time. I was worried that I was asking for too many tickets because I think I asked for a total of 8. And they were like, it's okay. Bret Hart asked for 64. I guess, oh, guess I'm okay. Guess I'm okay. I got like friends from middle and high school coming in from on the Long Island Railroad, and then also Santa Claus, the real Santa Claus, who you've seen on some of you may have seen on the this I Am Santa Claus DVD. He was a guest, and also the great Trina Michaels, because that's also how I roll. And she's a really good friend of mine as well.
Well, man, you never know who Mick Foley's friends with.
It's
Trina Michaels.
an eclectic group. And do you want to hear the secret to being good friends with an adult film star?
I was going to say, this is the first time I've heard Trina Michaels' name on our podcast, but I'm really glad she's popped up here. Yes. How do you become friends with an adult film star?
You just think of what every other person would say, and then you don't say that.
Oh, okay.
It took me about 7 years to earn her trust. 7 years, because, man, I know this program's not about adult film world, but I think when everything you do with your anatomy is on display, especially at the touch of a button, you really wall off who you trust and who you trust with other parts of yourself, your feelings, emotions. And it took about 7 years before she even uncrossed her arms around me. And I really took great pride in that friendship. And so I knew when I finally earned her trust that it was not something I could ever betray. And so I wouldn't even think of doing something or saying something offensive or stupid.
Well, I assume that the lovely Mrs. Foley did attend. Did she sit right next to Trina, or what was the seating arrangement?
No. I think TM was in the first level, whereas the Foleys were on the floor. I do remember Bubba Ray Dudley coming in at an Impact taping and saying, "You have your kids sitting next to Trina Michaels." I was like, yeah. I'm not going to differentiate,
I love it.
Yeah. So she's a really good person and really a spectacular. There she is, spectacular mom, and and I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people like as we're talking simultaneously Googling her, and that's part of the place.
Maybe don't Google her at work.
Maybe don't do that. I'm going to be quite honest. It took me a couple years before I even ventured. Just let me tell you, this introduction is like, this is back in the days of MySpace. Remember the MySpace days?
Oh yeah, of course.
So I had no idea how to actually get on the computer. So I would write things up and then have my son post them for me. And then I found out he was editing me without telling me. And I had to have the talk, how many New York Times #1 bestsellers have you written? He's like, it sounds better this way, Dad. I'm like, let me just teach me. And I gave him the old biblical adage, catch a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. I'm like, just teach me to fish. Let me get on here. So when I saw, I got on MySpace for the first time, there were all these, direct messages or whatever their equivalent was. And there's this message from this beautiful wrestling manager that says, hey, maybe someday we can work together. And I started looking through her stuff. It was only wrestling stuff. And I'm like, wow, right back, wow, you took a super kick in Mexico on Christmas Day. That shows a lot of dedication. And so she was essentially my first MySpace friend. And then she said one day, like, she came from an entertainment background. And you've been around me a while, Uncle Conrad and Mr. Grillo, right?
Yeah.
Not very judgmental, right? I mean,
not at all. Not at all.
But I think if I am judgmental, I'm less judgmental than most. And I thought, okay, it's probably exotic dancer, and I have no grudges against anybody in that field. And then she said, like, she goes, I did a few films and some of it was hardcore. So the next Impact taping, I asked a couple of the guys who I won't name, but who I had reason to believe may have been adult connoisseurs.
Right.
And one big star, I said, "Do you know?" She said that some of it was hardcore, and the person said, "Some of it." And I said, "Well, like, what does she do?" And he said, "Some of it." I said, "What?" He goes, "Some of it," like practically yelling at me. So curiosity got the better of me, and
Uh-oh.
honestly, I did not even know the things she did were physically possible.
As they say in wrestling, she's a hell of a hand.
But a really good friend, and she was at my Hall of Fame. Getting back to the actual speech, I really did not think I would ever have the opportunity to address a crowd that size. I wish I'd kept it in the 15-minute range. I think it went 42, but I don't think I ever got the heat that like Hillbilly Jim did, because I really felt good about it. I enjoyed it. I soaked it in. Like I said, I did not think I would ever be there, address a crowd that size. And then there was that magic. I guess you could script, but we did not. Where I said it has not been a completely successful career. I never did pin Chris Jericho, and Jericho. Next thing I know, he rolls up onto the stage, and that's a fairly high stage. It'll vault up a little bit, and I didn't know what to do. He lays down, and then you can actually hear me, I believe, if you listen closely, say, like, "I'm all out of elbows, brother." Like, I used to be fearless, and all I could think of is, oh, if I drop an elbow. In my mind, I was like, this is going to hurt for like 2 weeks.
Right.
And then when I saw Punk on stage, just things were going through my head so fast that I thought, I didn't. Are they working together? And it wasn't. I mean, Jericho, believe it or not, ended up doing the favor for uh,
Fandango.
Fandango. Yeah, and it shows you that that Chris is made out of 100% Teflon. I think
Yes.
it didn't affect him at all. And I realized, okay, pain or no pain, if I don't drop some type of elbow, I'm not gonna be able to look myself in the mirror for the rest of my life. And I said to Jericho, I think, like, whispered, I think you can hear it too. I said, "You're gonna take all the impact on this." And that's exactly what happened. Speaking of, yeah, look at it. He looks like Morocco about to take the Superfly splash. And not only is that a heck of a picture, but the fact that uh, Jericho and Punk both signed maybe 100 of those 11x14s, and we use those as incentives. There, I can't remember which photo they both signed. We use those as incentives for the Santa movie, and I think it's safe to say, like, we barely squeaked over the line. This was a pre GoFundMe Kickstarter where you had to meet the goal or else you got none of it, and we just barely squeaked over the line. And without those photos, which were by far and away the biggest seller, there would have been no I Am Santa movie. So I think that's pretty cool.
It's super cool. The night of the announcement, when they announced that you're going to be joining the Hall of Fame, you're interrupted by the Shield.
Yes,
Right back.
I just thought of a story I'm going to share with you in a minute. Okay, interrupted by the Shield, and you see me like gingerly roll out underneath the bottom rope because I was on the no touch list, and also because I didn't want to lay a beating down on Roman that early in his career.
Of course.
Yeah.
He may have never recovered.
You want me to tell you about the reaction from my kids?
Yes.
I call up to tell them to watch Raw, and I don't want to ruin the surprise, but it's really important. Hey, you guys it's Huey. So this is 2000, early 2013, 10 years ago. So Huey's 10. And I go, "Huey, you have to watch Raw." He goes, "Dad, I'm going to flag you." I said, What? He said, I'm going to flag you for saying something inappropriate on Twitter. So what he had read is I took a photo. I did, the spoken word show in Kansas City at a time, when my back was really giving me trouble. So I was seated like on a bar stool. So when a young lady came to take a photo, like in the way the anatomy's lined up, like, her boobs were only inches for my facial features. And I saw, back when I used to spend a lot of time on there, that's part of the reason, Grillo runs the account now, because I realized, I did not do Twitter well in moderation. But in this case, someone answered this young lady's tweet, and it was like, wow, your boobs are only a few inches from Mick Foley's face. And I do the quote tweet, and I say, looking closely, I was only inches away from those boobs. And I did the old get smart, ... and loving it. And Huey threatened to flag me on what was supposed to be one of the biggest nights of my career. And I was so forlorn when I walked out there for what was supposed to be a great moment. I was just dejected because my son had to flag me for being inappropriate.
That's so amazing. What a family. Terry Funk almost immediately announced as the person to induct you. Did you call Terry and ask him on the phone? How did that call go?
Yeah, sure did. I mean, he's not a text guy. He grudgingly, I guess, texted, but he's an old phone call guy. So I believe I called him up, and he did. He gave such a great speech. He did. It was funny, and it was poignant, and it was relatively brief, and that is important. And for anyone who's seen the 20 Years of Hell show, that story is completely true. That in all the times I'd seen those clips or the match uh, the entire match, I could tell that Undertaker and Terry shared words, but it was just said so casually that I never pondered what they were. So I never knew until Terry shared it with the world. He said, he gets into the ring. Undertaker drops down with that broken ankle. He's hobbling noticeably. He says something to Terry, and when Terry shared it with the world, I'm standing behind that curtain. I'm like 10 feet away, in the most famous arena in the country, and man, chills just went down my spine as Terry relays the Undertaker said, "See if he's alive." And so and this is, I'm talking about Hell in a Cell, but this is, my Hall of Fame induction experience. That Terry actually went over and checked my pulse, replied to the Undertaker that he's still breathing. And it was at that point that Terry was chokeslammed out of his shoes to buy me time. And when I came to, like 42 seconds later, I had no idea what those shoes were doing in the ring.
I get tired of hearing that story. I can't imagine waking up, seeing shoes, and wondering what the hell happened. And you've been thrown off.
So Grillo's just pulling these photos up. This guy's like a magician.
He is. He's on it. Go check us out if you haven't already over on YouTube. Foley on YouTube.com. So listen, you call up Terry, you ask him on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming he's in right away. What was the response like?
He was in, brother. He was in. He was glad to do it. I thought he did a great job, and like I said, I felt so fortunate, that I wasn't told. Like for example, Jerry Lawler. Jerry's been in the ring with some of the all-time greats, and Jerry is one of the all-time greats. And I'm sure if he had the choice, was it Shatner who inducted him, or did he induct Shatner? One or the other. And by the way, was that Jerry when they showed him talking about Andy Kaufman? That's Jerry now, right?
I believe so. Yes.
So he is doing so much better than I feared he might be, because I hadn't heard any progress reports, which I took to be a bad sign. But when I heard him talking and he, looked and sounded like the Lawler of old, man, I was really relieved. Really relieved. Because otherwise, if he had been 100%, he would have been doing that induction. I'm almost certain.
He's going to be back at Adam sooner rather than later, I'm sure.
That's good to know. That's really good to know.
So listen, it's a big deal to go in when you go in. What a class. Booker T, Bob Backlund, Trish Stratus, Donald Trump, and most importantly, Bruno Sammartino.
Yeah.
Now, this is before Donald Trump was the controversial figure he is
Right.
today, but he was, a big figure historically in New York. And so was
Right.
Bob Backlund, man. I mean, sort of the precursor for Hulk Hogan. But before there was a Hulk Hogan selling out Madison Square Garden, it was Bruno Sammartino. What a group to go in with, man.
And now a little Huey Foley Bruno story. Huey brings me his Bruno action figure. It's still in the case. And he says, Dad, can you get Bruno Sammartino to sign this? I said, buddy, I had no idea you were a fan. He said, I'm not, but he's old and he's probably going to die soon. This will be worth a lot of money.
Oh my goodness. I mean, listen, it's not a lie, but goodness gracious.
Yeah, I know. I could not bring myself. I don't, maybe I did. I don't know. But the one thing he cannot deal away is the signed Sylvester Stallone Shamrock Meats robe that was given to me by my friends at Ringside Collectibles. That one is not negotiable. Stays with us, or maybe makes a nice gift for Becky Lynch, who's a super Balboa fan.
Oh yeah. So, I think most of the time when you see this list, you think, well, Foley's the headliner.
Nope.
It was to me at least, but this is the first time Bruno had done anything with the company in forever.
I know. And look at Bruno's physique. For those of you who watch the show, I first saw this photo at the neurosurgeon in Pittsburgh. And I see Bruno was a patient. And I was like, it looks like they glued an 80-year-old man's head on the body of like a natural bodybuilding competitor. He looks phenomenal. And in case anyone wants to know if there was any back and forth or what the any words exchanged with me and the future president, when I walked through the curtain gorilla position, Undertaker was there. He sits there with Vince. He had this leather duster on, like the ankle length thing. And he stood up, and man, Undertaker's not a hugger by nature. And it was just like that really good, where you don't even care if anybody starts whispering it, locking it in and holding it on for so long. Because some of that speech had been about Undertaker. And then when I walked through, there was Mr. Trump with his, I think, 2 or 3 children. There was an excellent, no, it just sounded like Flair. God, I can't even do a Trump imitation. He said it was an excellent speech. I said, well, thank you, Mr. Trump. And his kids nodded, and that was the only interaction I've ever had with him.
So, Bruno, he's the headliner. Listen, we don't talk about it a lot, but listen, in order to put yourself in this professional wrestling business and be a public person and strive to be the best and have that quest for the world championship and to be a top guy, man, let's just be honest. You can't help but along the way develop maybe a healthy sense of an ego.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a shot to the ego when you're not the Hall of Fame main eventer? You're not.
No, it's not, because couple things. Don't mean to get all DDP on you here, but you don't let other people define for you what being a success is.
There you go.
And I wouldn't do that in my wrestling career based on where I wrestled in the card. I feel like, WrestleMania moments are not just confined to wrestling. They're expanded to life moments as well. And we get to pick out what our own WrestleMania moments are. So, for example, in wrestling, I had my WrestleMania moment with Edge in 2006. And not one person would say that we were billed as the main event, but a lot of people walked away thinking that we had the best match on the show. And first of all, I was glad to be on early because, again, there was the risk of my son Mickey not being able to hang in there for more than 90 minutes or 2 hours. And if I had gone on when Bruno went on, I probably would have looked out and seen none of my family members there. And I also remember what Willie Nelson said in regards to going on first. He said, nothing wrong with that. You get home earlier. The only regret I have on that whole night is that I had no prompter. I had no cards. I just had five names written. I had a name written on each finger, I think, of my right hand. I just wanted, and I did go off and started mentioning, plenty of people outside of that. But the idea was Snuka, Danucci, Shane Douglas, Undertaker, my wife. And after I finish, I'm feeling pretty good. I got a pretty good like performer's rush going on. You've heard this story, right?
Yeah, last year after Undertaker's Hall of Fame, you
Yeah,
told
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Because people are like, well, "Aren't you hot about it?" And I'll explain why I wasn't hot. Because you're about to find out for yourself. Is I look on the monitor and Booker is giving a speech, and he's looking out at Charmel, and he says, "Baby, I'd say I do 1,000 times a day. You're the most important thing in the world to me. I love you." And I look at my thumb, and it says Colette, and I was like, I forgot to mention my wife. So, yeah, we dismissed that idea of there being any heat with me and the Undertaker right away, based on the fact that if I can't remember to say my wife's name, you gotta cut to the dead man a little slack as well.
Well said. Well said. In the run up to the event, you tweeted, I'm in a much better frame of mind after watching my new DVD with my kids. I have so much to be proud of. No way I'll give fans anything less than the best possible speech I can.
Ah,
And if the powers that be decide not to air my speech on television, I'll accept that it was simply a decision that was beyond my control and do everything I can through the passion for my profession to make that decision look as glaringly stupid as possible.
ooh.
Yeah. So,
And I don't, even if it was, couldn't tell you now whether it was live or whether it was not. But I think it's safe to say, hundreds of thousands of people have seen, if not the
yes.
whole thing, then clips of it. And I think even though it was lengthy, that it was really well received. And again, I just encourage everyone out there. And please, if you've got an attorney, I just got to appeal to DDP not to sue me for infringing on his positivity territory. But don't let other people define what being a success is. You do get to define that for yourself, and that includes being in the Hall of Fame. Because as proud as I am to be in there, I will tell people who base the importance of their career almost solely on whether or not they're inducted. I try to talk. Leon White was the guy I just couldn't, my words just wouldn't sink in. Every conversation I had with him would revolve around the Hall of Fame. And man, and this is, I'm not drawing a parallel to the circumstances surrounding the discussions I had when I was a RAINN volunteer, but I was an online volunteer, so I didn't speak to people. I was online by that time. I learned. I made a lot of typos, but I got my points across. And when you were speaking to self harmers, the
Yes.
most frustrating thing was no matter how much you tried to help them, it would always come around in a circle back to the self harming being the answer, at least a temporary solution to the emotional pain they felt. And again, I'm not making light of those people going through a terrible ordeal. I'm just trying to say that Leon was in the same way that this it would come around in a circle. And no matter how much I tried to make him see that he'd had a career like no other and that he did not need a Hall of Fame, that is both real and fictional at the same time, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And then Leon would be almost like it would go in one ear and out the other. It's like, I need to be in that Hall of Fame, Jack. And I mean, in that case, I did mention to Mr. McMahon, we know he's going to be in sooner or later. I think it should be sooner. I don't think he's going to be around too long. And he wasn't. At that point, he had told me he had 2 years left to live, and I think he lived 22 months.
Listen, you brought up a great subject because we've seen some maybe more hardened veterans who have a different approach and a different attitude about the Hall of Fame. And they say, oh, it's an X number of dollar payday, and it's a class ring like you get in high school, or it's a little silly plaque. They really diminish it. But I've heard some of those same people who had that attitude, man, when they stand up there on that podium and they realize they're surrounded by their peers and fans, man, like this sense sort of washes over them. Did you ever have the negative attitude, and how did you feel when you looked out on that crowd?
No, I discussed, the negativity I felt a couple days leading up to it. First of all, prior to that kind of revelation and promise I made to myself in that movie cinema room, whatever you call it, at the condo, um, I, you know what, I was like, I don't need to be inducted because the fans and my colleagues, especially, when I would go back to WWE, the superstars of that era treated me so well with so much respect, and the fans did too. That it was like every day I felt like I was in the Hall of Fame. So I would have been okay if I wasn't inducted. And plus, I had the Cauliflower Alley, and I think the National Wrestling. I was already in a few of them. WWE still, that's the
Yes.
one you want to be in. It's still the one you want to be in. But I enjoyed every moment of it. And I just want to, speaking about uh, people feeling like they need that certification to make their career worthwhile. I'm really glad that after WWE honored Connor the Crusher, that they moved to honoring different type of situations with the Warrior Award. I think was it Robin Roberts, breast cancer survivor. The young man who was a Rutgers football player, was paralyzed. That amazing kid who tore the house down, who had the kidney replacement. And this year was Timmy White, because for a few years I had people reaching out to me who had lost children, wondering what they had to do to get their kid in the Hall of Fame, and it was like, oh, you can't make this Hall of Fame, you can't make the value of your child's life dependent on whether or not they are entered into a large, somewhat fictional Hall of Fame. So man, that was heartbreaking because once parents saw Connor in there, they thought that's the ultimate way to honor my child, to have this induction. And so I'm glad WWE moved away. Connor was amazing, and Daniel Bryan gave that great speech. But I'm glad they moved away from simply honoring, uh, amazing children posthumously.
Let's talk a little bit about your speeches that night. There's been a lot written about this. Do they, the production team, the writing staff, whoever, a producer, come along and say, you've got X number of minutes and this guy's going to help you with your speech? Or what's that process like?
I cannot speak for what it's been like in the last 10 years. I just know that, geez, it's killing me that I can't remember the guy. He was such a great writer too, but he looked like an elf. He even had the pointed ears, and he was about 5'1", would have made a dynamite elf. And he didn't mind. He's a lot, it's not a bad thing. I guess Miles Finch thought it was a bad thing to be called an elf. Uh, a heck of a drop kick on Miles Finch too, by the way. And a nice, I believe that was a judo throw of some type, exercised on Buddy. Um, but we sat down, and I just verbally told him some things I wanted to say. Bruno was in the little restaurant having dinner with Dominic Nucci and someone else, and I went over to Bruno and I said, "Do you mind if I mention what an honor, Bruno Sammartino?" And I had the exact number of days he's held the title for. It was something incredible, 2,000, 120, and Bob Backlund held it for 5 years, so that was like 1,572, and me 41. And Bruno, he popped big on it, and I was like, okay, we're okay there. But Vince walked by. He said, "Just enjoy yourselves. There's no time limit." The only thing he asked was not that we not thank him. And I can only tell you that I did not have to submit a speech, the Stacy Keebler induction, and I didn't have any cards. I had nothing. I just wanted to just hit a few key points, with the main one being what we spoke about earlier, that I knew from experience what an amazing night this is. I talked about the last time I saw her at the Jets game. I should have gotten a photo to them so they could have put it up there. And I just wanted to emphasize the importance of the occasion, that I knew it because I'd been there, and that it meant so much to me to be part of Stacy's night. So in my case, look at that.
Great photo.
Can I tell you this? I swear to you, I'm not exaggerating. Coast to coast flight. It's a red eye, right? This is say 2002. I don't know, probably 2001, 2002, after she joined, and she says to me, "Mick, would you mind if I asked the person next to you to switch seats for me so we can talk on the flight?" And I went, "Yeah, absolutely." And Conrad, I witnessed Stacy Keebler eat an entire tuna fish sandwich.
Wow.
Yet when she spoke to me, it was like she'd just eaten a full pack of Doublemint gum. It was the most amazing thing, sensory experience. It was just like everything about her was just, man, just a wonderful. Look at there's the Jets thing. Look at that smile. This was right before she Dancing with the Stars premiered, which obviously changed her life. And man, sometimes good things really do happen to good people, and she's one of the best in my book.
No doubt. And your speech was one of the best. You made a great point during your speech. You said something like, "I'm not sure how the class of 2014 will follow this class. Bruno Backlund and myself have held the WWE title for a total of 6,225 days. Bruno was the WWE champ for 4,040 days. Bob Backlund was the WWE champ for 2,138 days. And I myself, Mick Foley, 47 days."
Because Bruno had not only the 7-year run, but he followed it up with like a 4-year run. Yeah, I don't. That was to me. I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I think that was. If someone has followed me, they know I'm not a big fan of the former president, but he's still a former president. He's in our Hall of Fame. I argued that he should have been out of there, But anyway, I'm not going to go there. But it was a great class. I don't know if you can ever have another class quite that good.
Let's talk a little bit about the end of your speech, because you mentioned that you've got the whole Chris Jericho run in, and then afterwards you give a shout out to the lovely Mrs. Foley. "Yo, Adrian, I did it."
Oh, I did. Okay, I did say that, and then Santa came. Well, this is one of my favorite. I won't perform the story, but I did have a meeting with Mr. McMahon a couple weeks before the Hall of Fame, in which I mentioned I'd never had any kind of special entrance or exit. And Vince was not only eating a protein bar, but he was reading the ingredients. And I knew, like, this is where I no longer have the sway that I once did, reading the ingredients. Well, I try to make a point, and when okay, get to your point. And I said, I'd like to fly into the sky on a sleigh with Santa Claus. Next, to tell you the truth, I don't think we know how to do that. And I do a fictitious account. I did, in past shows, where I do an imaginary conversation where I fire up against Mr. McMahon, and it was my favorite story of my 2013 tour. And man, I beg people the next time I do one of these things, one of these one man tours in 2025, beg fans to ask me about it during the Q&As. I love telling that story live. So I didn't get to fly into the sky, but I did have Santa come in and walk me off, and that made a perfect ending to the documentary. And so it was a really cool moment. And even though I'm known as this, look at look at Renee. Oh man, Renee she was new in the company at that point.
Yeah.
And that it looks more like a granny jacket because of the fur. But I thought the flannel Santa suit was something special. And that may have been the first or second time I talked to Renee and liked her immediately. And I was just on a real good, I was on a real good natural high. And I had reserved the basement of the Foley's restaurant and bar, just a couple of just a couple of blocks from the garden. And so we had a little after party, and all of my guests were there, and Brendan Burns was there as well, great Australian comic, a few other people, maybe 20 people in all. But it was just really nice to, have that time to enjoy it. That's part of the challenge, of being on the road with WWE, is that you don't often really get to enjoy those special moments for very long, because the next day you're on the road again. The day after Mania. I mean, I remember lying in bed in Chicago the day after I'd done my match with Edge in 2006, and I could barely move. And I think I even called up and got the room for like at least one more day because I was having so much trouble getting around. And Edge actually wrestled that night.
Wow.
So it's so hard to enjoy it when you peaked emotionally and then you have to go out there again the next night and do it all over again. So like I said, it's not rare, but it's not very common that you get to really enjoy those big moments. But that night I did.
You've mentioned before that there was an incident going back all the way to 1996 that made you think, I'm not going to bring my family, specifically Mrs. Foley,
Yeah.
around. But they were at your Hall of Fame induction, and
Yeah.
we saw them in the photos. They were at the Hall of Fame ceremony this last year, just a few
Yeah.
weeks ago with Stacy. When was Mrs. Foley comfortable coming back, or were you comfortable reintroducing her? Was this her first time back?
No, no. 2008, she was at the Royal Rumble at the Garden. We even rented a limo. So I had all the kids. And that was a trip for me because Big Daddy V spent quite a bit of time sitting on my head when I was in the corner. And I knew where my kids were sitting. It was like section 110, like I knew where it was. So I was able to look out at my family. And my son Mickey was his thumb down. He was booing me, which is just tremendous, right? If you're a dad, like that's such a great, great moment as a dad to see your own kid
Boo you. Yeah.
booing you. So I think by 2008, and look, I know Colette had been with me a few times here and there at Hershey, but they were few and far between. 2000, I think by 2008, we'd gotten over the sting. I think by then we were okay.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I want to ask, as far as modern present day, I feel like we should talk about that for a moment. Did you see Vince at the Hall of Fame?
I did not. I did not see him. I heard he was there at the next night at Mania. I'm not sure if he was there or not, but I did not have a chance to see him. Mustache game strong, real strong. I would.
I mean, listen, I think internally there are some friends of ours who think he looks like Mr. Gomez from the Addams Family.
He does.
My goodness.
And it looked like he'd had a little of the dye put in the hair.
Maybe a
Uh,
little, you think?
as I look at that, oh, Conrad, I am so grateful that I took a chance like 4 years ago. Took the chance that wrestling fans would accept that a man in his 50s would no longer have jet black facial hair. And I'm part of that clear system, that gets you through the airports a little
Yep.
quicker. And I'm so embarrassed every time I do the thing and I look at the deal with my eyes, and up pops a photo of a man in his 50s with that ridiculous black beard. And I'm like, what was I thinking? Who did I think I was fooling? So I'm trying to age, fairly gracefully here. I kind of touch gray. It makes me look scholarly, right?
Listen, I like it. I like the gray. I say you keep the gray.
Thank you.
There's Mr. McMahon calling right there. Just get your advice about the new
It's
mic.
not, but it's Dick Flanagan, a Danucci graduate who was one part of the Heartbreakers, along with Dante Danucci, who also known as Mark Keenan, who successfully promoted a bunch of ECW shows back in the day.
Well, okay. How about that? So listen, we got to address the elephant in the room. There's lots of things happening this past weekend. We should start maybe at the beginning. We'll call it the beginning. We heard lots of speculation, lots of rumor. Will CM Punk be coming back? Will he not? It was the talk of wrestling for about 2 weeks leading into WrestleMania. You and I are having a chance to sit and discuss it really for the first time.
Yeah.
With all the new developments, maybe there was some drama stirred up by Dave Meltzer accidentally. What'd you make of this? Do you think we'll see CM Punk back in AEW?
AEW or WWE?
Either one.
I don't, we talked about this a little bit a few months ago when the defecation hit the rotating oscillator in AEW at the press conference. And I just mentioned that you gotta be happy at a certain point. Like you have to strive. Like just because you're reaching for the brass ring, we've gone over what the brass ring actually
Yes.
is, right?
Yes.
It
Yes.
is an old time carousel mechanical arm that comes out with a holding a brass ring. So you reach out, and best case scenario, you get 4 or 5 brass rings. Worst case scenario, you fall off your horse and suffer serious injury, which is why they are few and far between. But since we're going with the a theme park or amusement park scenario, the secret, I think, to life, at least wrestling, the secret to enjoying your life in wrestling is to reach for that brass ring, but also once in a while be willing to stop and smell the roses. And so I hope if Punk comes back that he just finds a way to be content. This guy's had an amazing career. He was a great champion for WWE. We could argue whether or not he was a needle mover, but I can tell you that he delivered very good to great matches on a regular basis, like on an almost nightly basis, when he was in considerable pain. And I think he was well compensated. And I just hope if he does come back that he appreciates it and enjoys it.
Well, of course, as soon as that was over, or it feels like it fizzled out, that conversation died down quite a bit with all the festivities for WrestleMania. Lots of people were wondering what would or wouldn't happen. Before we got to Saturday's WrestleMania, we saw NXT crown a new champion, Braun Breaker, who has been the man in NXT for a long time. Rick Steiner's son goes down at the hands of Carmelo Hayes. And it's Hayes' time now. He's going to be the ringleader for NXT. Do you assume that means Braun is going to be moving to the main roster? I think a lot of people thought they would have seen him on Monday Night Raw, but it didn't happen.
That would be my guess, unless they think he needs a little more seasoning. It's one thing to work as a champion, but I think to be as well rounded as possible, you should have quite a bit of experience without that title. And I do know, and listen, I've been pretty open on our show saying that I don't watch as much wrestling as I used to. I always love it, but I think my kids are not as into it as they were. And I always watch with them. It was great family time as it is for,
Sure.
so many kids around the world. But I remember my son Dewey, who was one of the lead writers for NXT. He really loved working with Carmelo. Thought he was going to be a huge star, and I remember him saying the same thing about Damian Priest, and that obviously has turned out to be true. So Dewey Foley's got a pretty good track record with these predictions. So I will say that yeah, Carmelo Hayes, he is a 5-tool player.
Of course, we also saw some other controversy. I guess on Saturday, the news came out that there was maybe an incident at WrestleCon. You spent the entire weekend at WrestleCon. You did a little comedy show. You did a little Dresselmania, and
Well,
you
I
were
didn't do the
meeting.
comedy show. I was interviewed by Colt Cabana. So we did a little Q&A, told a couple of little stories. So I didn't actually do like a show, but yeah, I was, oh man, from Thursday through Sunday, even yesterday. Yeah, they're my ladies. Man, I love them both. And this experience on Most Wanted Treasures has really solidified that friendship with Lita. That's been a great, great experience. Um, and I worked really hard. I did hear about the issue. You're talking about the Steiner thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of chatter coming out of that, but I wanted to know, let's talk about some positive things that happened at WrestleCon too, not just negative.
Okay. You have anything in mind?
Well, you were there. I was hoping you could give me some positive. I only
Well,
heard
look, I
bad.
mean, the saddest thing, well, I mean, this is not diminishing, Rick Steiner going out of his way to make one of the other guests feel really bad, which is really unfortunate.
Yes.
There's still some backwards thinking. And even if someone has an opinion, no need to hurt somebody like that. And it was just